Morning, folks. Please feel free to stop me, ask questions. This nice informal get-together. Tom Eagle with the Narrragansett Bay Commission. Go ahead, James. I'll get right into it. I'm going to talk about give you a little update on our NBC construction projects and get right into NBC nutrients monitoring and what we're finding in the Blackstone and in the Upper Bay. As was mentioned earlier, we have our combined sewer overflow project. That's essentially a $1.3 billion project, 3 phases over 20 years. Phase 1 was completed in 2008 at a cost of $359 million. It's essentially a tunnel that runs from Fields Point to up along the riverfront, Providence River, up towards the State House, and turns left behind the Foundry building where it terminates. It's a tunnel 300 feet deep that captures the stormwater flow from about 7 CSOs along the Providence River. Phase 2 is underway right now, and you'll notice construction going on along the Woonasquatucket River and along the east side of Providence. There's some sewer separation. There's a wetlands development project. There's a big sewer interceptor going in along the Woonasquatucket that will capture all of the overflows from the CSOs, dump them all into the tunnel. There's going to be an interceptor along the Seekonk River also that will capture those CSOs and dump them into the tunnel. This tunnel project is designed for a 3-month storm, which means you will still have overflows about 4 times a year. And with climate change and more rainfall, that may change. Phase 2 is a $363 million project that is underway and is scheduled for completion in 2014. Phase 3 is going to be another deep rock tunnel project that's going to run along the Blackstone Valley area up into Pawtucket and Central Falls and capture the CSOs along that stretch of the bay. And that's a cost of about $603 million. There's going to be a period of evaluation after Phase 2 and then design in 2016, 2017. And that's if that project completely goes forward as is. And as Jonathan had indicated, there's the big buzz is stormwater and how to deal with stormwater. We've dealt with stormwater for years. And as Jonathan mentioned, there's talk about possibly the Narrragansett Bay Commission taking over stormwater in the state or even in our existing management district. And naturally, if that does occur, that everything would have to probably be reevaluated and to see whether green infrastructure is a better alternative than the size of the tunnel that's initially proposed. We've had great successes with the Phase 1 of the tunnel. Our modeling shows that our CSOs discharge 2.2 billion gallons a year of combined sewer overflow into Narragansett Bay, into the rivers that feed Narragansett Bay. And the tunnel now captures 1.1 billion gallons. So we're essentially capturing about 50% of the flow through this tunnel. It's actually about 4.4 billion gallons already collected. That's changed over the past week since we put these slides together. Depending on where you are in the bay, we've seen about a 34% decrease in bacterial loadings to the bay. And in some portions of the bay, it's a lot greater. There's certain areas of the bay, like Connecticut Triangle, where there's other influences that are still causing bad bacteria, high bacteria fecal coliform bacteria levels. But as a result, DEM has relaxed their shellfish enclosure regulations because we've seen such a good improvement in water quality with regard to bacteria. And the tunnel does prevent other pollutants from getting into Narragansett Bay. Roughly 1.5 million pounds of TSS have already been removed, BOD, maybe about 100,000 pounds of nitrogen since 2008. But that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the nutrients that do come out. It's not a great deal of nitrogen that is coming out through the CSOs.
Hold on.
Yep.
Can you go back?
Yep.
So where does that metal go?
These pollutants have gone to our treatment plant and are being removed.
But then where does it go?
Well, if it's metals, it would go into the sludge. And the sludge is recycled as a biosolids. We have Class A biosolids.
So
some of it does.
Reapplied to land somewhere?
It can get reapplied to lands. It can also, some of it is incinerated. Many wastewater treatment plants incinerate this sludge.
Yeah, but that wouldn't break down the metal.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, so what happens to the metal?
Well, it depends what it's being used for. It's fertilizer. It could be taken up in trees. It can be taken up in plants. So it is a fertilizer. It's an additive that meets EPA criteria for metals. So, but these are metals what you need to keep in mind is that in 1981, when the Narragansett Bay Commission took over Fields Point and relieved Providence of its burdens, there was 1 million pounds of heavy metals that were going into that plant every year, passing through that plant into Narragansett Bay. So we're down to 23,000 pounds a year of heavy metals that go into that plant. So we've made great strides with metals, and as a result of that, the Providence and Seekonk rivers have been removed from the EPA 303D list of impaired waters for toxic metals. So metals are really not the major problem. You're looking at, there is cadmium there, 68 pounds of cadmium. That's over 4 years. Okay, so that's going into our sludge since 2008. So it's not a lot of metals, believe me, if you look at the grand scheme of things. We also have alternative energy projects. One of my personal goals is to make the Narragansett Bay Commission a net zero agency. Basically, we would be able to produce all of our own energy, hopefully before I retire or hit the Powerball. So we have 3 wind turbines that you see at Fields Point that aren't spinning yet, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that. National Grid is finally finishing up their work over the past couple of weeks, and next Monday on the 24th, we're going to shut down the plant and restart it with new power sources coming in, new transformers, changing the voltage of the plant to accommodate these wind turbines, and you're going to see the turbines starting to spin one at a time starting that next week, and we're going to start testing them out, and hopefully by the end of the month we'll have the ribbon cutting ceremony, and these things will be producing energy to help our ratepayers. We have a biogas project at our Buckland Point facility that we did a feasibility on, and that's going to power probably 40% of that facility. That's methane that comes off of our sludge when we digest the sludge. We take that methane and we'll run generators to produce electricity at that facility. I also have staff working on a 2.6 megawatt solar project at Buckland Point. We have an old sludge landfill there that we would cover over and put in photocells. So, next slide, please. Now to the stuff that everybody's interested in is nutrients. At Fields Point, we are in the construction phase right now to reduce our nitrogen. We have a permanent limit of 5 that we have to meet following construction. To get to 5, we're going to spend $31 million to reduce about 3,000 pounds of nitrogen a day. For this permit season, we're already meeting 8.2, and for the month of August, we hit 4.2. So we're very, very impressed. We're already below the permit limit. Next slide, please. Buckland Point was designed to meet 8.5 in 2005-2006 when it went online. At that time, we were spending $70 million to upgrade that facility. $8.3 million of that was for the initial upgrade towards the nitrogen reduction. Over the years, we've improved our treatment processes, and we're down to 6.2 for this season. We are upgrading it to meet 5. And that's going to cost us $13 million to reduce 104 pounds of nitrogen a day. So very expensive to reduce nitrogen as you get to these lower levels. What we have found is that once you build these facilities, you don't turn them on and immediately start seeing the number that you think you're going to get. And you may actually get lower and lower as the plants get acclimated and as the operators and engineers that run these facilities learn more about the process. Next slide, please. So how is the Narragansett Bay Commission doing since 2003? In 2003, we've seen 1 million fish get killed in Greenwich Bay in August of 2003 with the fish kill, and there were all reports, and our legislature was all up in arms, and what's happening to the bay, are we killing the bay, and what's going on? So we had this big push to really get moving on nitrogen and nutrients. The studies found that the fish kill was caused by many problems: neap tide, stratification, rainfall, nitrogen, and the only thing that we can control really is the nitrogen that we put into the waters. And so what we're looking at right now is at Fields Point, we're already seeing a 50% reduction in our nitrogen load, and at Buckland Point, we're achieving a 69% reduction. Overall, the Bay Commission has reduced its nitrogen load by 56% since then. When we hit 5 at both facilities, we will have reduced our nitrogen load by 70% compared to 2003 loading. That's horrible slide, but initiated a nutrients monitoring program in 2005. We weren't really satisfied with the science that was used to develop our permits. The Merle study was used, which was a 1981 study done by Candace Oviatt down at the Merle Lab at University of Rhode Island. It was done for one particular purpose, but that information was used to develop permits for us. And so we wanted to really know what's going on in Narragansett Bay. Where's the loading coming from? Where is the nitrogen loading come from? Is reducing nitrogen to the levels that are proposed going to do the trick. So we sampled for a complete suite of nitrogen compounds at all of these locations. We sampled the river and bay stations twice a month, and we want to know what Massachusetts, our friends here from Massachusetts, are putting down into Rhode Island. So we sample at the borders of the rivers with Massachusetts once a month. We don't have a TMDL for Narragansett Bay for our receiving waters and up in Narragansett Bay for nitrogen. So it's very difficult to us to see, are we meeting, are we going to achieve water quality standards? Because that TMDL was not done. The permits were based upon the Merle study. So we go to the National Coastal Condition Report that's put out by NOAA and EPA. And for the Northeast and the Gulf states, they recommend the dissolved inorganic concentration of good is less than 0.1 milligrams per liter. Next slide, please. These are absolutely horrible. I don't know what happened when I emailed them to you, but the slides, my graphs are not there. But in any case, dissolved inorganic nitrogen, this shows us the locations, and you can see the concentrations for, in the river here, you can see down here at Connecticut Point, a concentration of 0.1. We're almost meeting the less than 0.1 concentration for dissolved inorganic nitrogen at Connecticut. And the entire Providence River is quite good, is also in the fair category between 0.1, 0.2, 0.28. When you get up into the Seekonk River, it was poor. I want you to take note here, though, we have 19.22 inches of rainfall. This is for 2010. If you go to the next slide. This is for 2011. And for 2010, when I saw the data, I was very optimistic. I said, boy, we're very close, and maybe when we have our nitrogen reductions, we're going to be in the ballpark to meet these concentrations that the EPA coastal report recommends. But then 2011 came around, and at Connecticut Point, we doubled. We went to 0.2 for that summer permit season. So there goes my optimism. I wasn't too pleased. We're still in the fair category, though, and once again, Phillipsdale, poor, 0.7. Okay, next slide.
But there was 30 inches of rain.
But there were 30 inches of rain. We had 12 more inches of rain that permit season. So that goes to confirm what Jonathan and what Peter is indicating about rainfall. So we did a workshop. Narragansett Bay Commission sponsored a workshop last year where we brought all the scientists together and we wanted to find out what research everyone's working on and what are the latest findings. And one of the leading nitrogen experts said, well, you're reducing all this nitrogen, but we don't know if it's going to do anything for dissolved oxygen. And this is why we're doing all of this, to improve dissolved oxygen. You haven't shown me the nexus. No one has shown the nexus between nitrogen loading and low dissolved oxygen levels in the bay. So I'm driving my scientists completely crazy to find that nexus. And so here's what this graph here shows the percent of time that the upper bay is hypoxic at our Buckland Point monitoring station at our buoy. And this is average concentration. This is the new DO standard that DEM is using. They have a new DO standard that uses a bunch of different computer programs and formulas to calculate percent of time that the water is impaired for the oxygen. And I want you to see, this is our rainfall. And you can see how hypoxia changes every year with rainfall. And we have correlation coefficients of 0.8 and 0.82. So very good correlation coefficients. Next slide, please. And I apologize for these slides. You can't see what the real slide is. When I emailed it to James, I lost something there in the translation. It's the projector, okay. But this, I do have lines on here that show the good, fair, and poor areas of the dissolved inorganic nitrogen. But you can see what happens when it rains. We're putting a great deal more nitrogen into the water. But we also believe it's the freshwater inputs that are causing a major problem in the Upper Bay. And what I have my scientists doing now is looking at each of these, looking at these curves of where we have hypoxia, the percent of time of hypoxia, and what caused that hypoxic event. Was it stratification, or was it an algae bloom? Okay, so if it's an algae bloom, well, then it's clearly nitrogen. If it's simply stratification, and just to explain to you what stratification is, when fresh water covers the salt water, fresh water is highly oxygenated, and the bottom water is the seawater, and you have this difference in density, and the oxygen from the air cannot penetrate through the oxygen through the fresh water into the saltwater layer. So the oxygen does not penetrate, and that's called stratification. So we're trying to determine what happens, so we know when we have more rainfall, we have more freshwater inputs, and we know we have stratification, to what extent. So that's what we're looking at now, so that we can determine that. So the Upper Bay, total dissolved nitrogen loading versus rainfall. And this is a very busy chart, but I like to show it because it shows all the different sources, including the wastewater treatment plants. And we're down here in the bottom, but you can see when it rains. This is the March floods. 90,000 pounds a day of nitrogen were going into Narrragansett Bay from the rainfall. Typically, we're down around 10,000 pounds, dry weather. So you can see the difference. And this actually correlates with the other graphs that I've shown. So when that rainfall occurs during those summer months and we're washing all this nitrogen into Narragansett Bay, it will also have an effect on oxygen levels. Next slide, please. This is just for the Blackstone, the same chart, so that you can see what happens. And you can see those big slugs of nitrogen coming out of the Blackstone, 40,000 pounds. And typically what happens when it rains, this doesn't happen, the rainfall doesn't happen, the nitrogen loading doesn't happen for just one day. It takes days for that watershed to drain. And we see this 5 to 10 days following the rain event. Yes, sir?
So your rainfall is a surrogate really for runoff?
The rainfall is runoff. You know, do we need to start looking back at land use planning regulations, change the way we require the application of fertilizers? What are some of the easy things that we can do? Florida does already. You know, other states do it. They ban certain types of fertilizers, don't allow you to do certain things. So do we need to look at that as a first step? Is that an easy fix? Okay, so those are some of the things that, you know, once you talk about it and come up with solutions. Next slide, please. This is total dissolved nitrogen in the rivers. And unfortunately, my rivers are not there. I just have a bunch of dots. But you can see at the state line, and my scientists put this into different colors that don't show up too well, but the red is the highest loadings. And you can see the Blackstone concentrations of nitrogen in the rivers. This is for all data between 2006 and 2011. And the highest concentrations are in the 10-mile river, the Blackstone River, and the Patuxent River. Blackstone came in third on this one, so they weren't the worst on this one. The 10-mile was the worst, followed by the Patuxent for nitrogen. At the state line was pretty much, for the Blackstone, the state line was pretty similar to Route 116, and Slater Mill was a little lower. The lowest rivers were the Lees, the Palmer, and the Mashasset rivers. So if you look at the Blackstone for the total dissolved nitrogen, rain versus wet versus dry weather. Here's your dry weather, and when it rains, and this is at the state line, it goes up 110%, the nitrogen load coming in, and that's from runoff. At Slater Dam, it's about a 77% increase due to wet weather. Next slide, please. So where is the nitrogen coming from? This is data provided by the Upper Blackstone Water Pollution Abatement District. This is their effluent that's coming out of their plant. And you can see when their system went online in around 2009, and they've reduced their nitrogen probably around 50% based upon back of the envelope calculation, just looking at this. But this number is right around 5. And that's the permit that's being contested, is requiring them to go to 5 for total nitrogen. So it looks like they're at the levels that they want to be at by the new permit that's being litigated at this point. Next slide. And so our data, we wanted to see how accurate is it? Does it compare to what we're seeing from their data? And from pre-BNR, we were seeing about 4,400 pounds a day and this is at the state line, Rhode Island with Massachusetts on the Blackstone. And if we look at post-BNR and we exclude the March and April floods, the March and April floods, as you saw, had 90,000 pounds of nutrients coming into Narrragansett Bay, 40-something thousand pounds coming just down the Blackstone. So if we eliminate that, we're looking at about a 31% reduction in nitrogen loading at the state line. So that's pretty significant for nitrogen reduction. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to do phosphorus now. It'll take me a minute. Same analysis for phosphorus in the rivers. Highest concentrations are coming out of the Blackstone. At 116, Route 116 is the highest. So well, guess what? There's a Rhode Island source, phosphorus, that's causing a lot of high loading there. And the state line is 62 parts per billion. Lowest rivers are Woonasquatucket and Moshasset and the Runnings River. Next slide. Upper Blackstone data, once again, great reductions in phosphorus, 70% reduction in phosphorus. It looks like they're down right around 0.4 right now, and the permit that's being contested requires them to go to 0.1. So sounds like a lot of legal action for 0.3 of a part per million of phosphorus. Next slide. Our data does verify these reductions in the Blackstone, and we're seeing a 78% reduction down to about 45 pounds a day of orthophosphate. Next. And so basically my conclusions, nitrogen's been reduced by NBC's reduced our nitrogen by 56%. Other POTWs are achieving impressive nutrient reductions. Nutrient loading in the area rivers increases significantly as rainfall does, as does dissolved oxygen. Percent of time dissolved oxygen is impaired, increases as rainfall increases. Our data verifies that the Upper Blackstone has reduced its load by 50% for nitrogen and 70% for phosphorus. And we're seeing those loading reductions in the Blackstone. Blackstone has reduced, loadings increase in the Blackstone 77 to 110% when it rains. And we've actually, and that's an average, we see particular rainstorms where the loading will increase 400% just by one rain event. So there is a lot of nitrogen that gets washed into the watershed. And dry weather nitrogen loadings in the Blackstone is down 31% for nitrogen and 78% for phosphorus. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Andrew, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so it's back and forth. We're supposed to, so if you could write down your questions. I think, unless you have a real quick question, technical question, but we're going to have a quick break, is that right?
Yeah, just a quick break.
Quick break. And,
Coffee and muffin.
Donna, you're sorry.
I do have a question, but this relates back to John's talk. But Jonathan, I think you mentioned that on your bond issue, there's federal money, federal net money for improvements to wastewater treatment plants.
That's correct.
Well, we're hearing in Worcester that there is no federal money for wastewater treatment. So help me here. Help me understand where the federal money comes from.
So the federal, and Tom can weigh in on this as well, the federal government matches for every dollar the state puts in, the federal government adds $4. So for a $100 million project or $100 million of capital investment in wastewater treatment infrastructure, if the state puts in 20, the Fed will kick in 80. And that can be magnified through the state revolving fund by taking that $100 million and basically creating revenue bonds that are sold on Wall Street to other investors who are interested in making an investment in return. So that $100 million can basically create a attractive investment vehicle which allows the state to bring in additional capital to provide to the wastewater treatment districts a basically lower than market rate cost to borrow. And so it's magnified in that way. And the source, the actual funding source, Tom, I don't know if you can identify that.
Yeah, Donna, we are engineers that run wastewater treatment plants. We love to build things. If we had the money, we would build it. You know, that's not the problem. The problem is we don't have the money. And as Jonathan says, we need to approve these bond issues, and we support that. When the Construction and Grants Program was first formed in the 80s and the 70s under the Clean Water Act. The federal government gave us the money. They were grants, and those grants are not there anymore. And that may be what you're referring to. So what happens is this money that Jonathan is talking about, if Rhode Island passes this bond referendum, that would go to Clean Water Finance. Clean Water Finance would leverage that money. They would issue those bonds, but then they would make it to us as a loan. It may be a low-interest loan. It may have some principal forgiveness with it, but it will provide money to update the infrastructure. Our ratepayers still have to pay off that loan. You know, so that's the problem. You know, so this is why, as a wastewater treatment agency, we try to make sure that we're using the best science, and this is the best decision, and this is where we're going to get the most bang for our buck on water quality improvements. Is it worth spending $13 million to remove 104 pounds of nitrogen, or can that $13 million go to 13 projects in different cities and towns for green infrastructure that will infiltrate stormwater and do other things that could remove more nitrogen?
I mean, I would just say the important point is that the federal dollars lower the cost of the money. It is not, as Tom said, it's not a grant, but it significantly lowers the cost of the fund. It still has to be borrowed, and the ratepayers do have to pay it back. So it does have a direct impact on the ratepayers, but lower than it would be. Higher than it would be if you had a straight grant, but lower than it would be if you had to go in the public markets to borrow the money.
And Massachusetts wants to do the same thing.
So I don't know.
I'm not sure what status, and maybe someone from Mass DEP could comment on that, but
They have the low-interest loans, the circulating RSF, but unfortunately, they were not able to tap this recent amount of federal money that actually paid for improvements because they were appealing the permit. If they had had a plan, and then I don't know, the state's role is to encourage the commission or the planning, regional planning. That's, yeah. I don't know. Sorry we took so long. Please write down your questions and we'll have them